Hi, my name is Piotr Kwiatkowski. I'm the designer of Nomads, Origin Stories. Let's start with the setup. To get the game on the table, we put the world map in the very center. Then we start with the tokens placed onto the map. Next, we take the global objectives, and two of them we leave face up. The other ones are going to be uncovered throughout the rest of the game. We take also 3 events, end of age events, and leave one of them face up. Next, we place face down 2 decks of cards. One is elder cards, one is tribe objectives. We also lay out 4 art cards face up and 4 invention cards face up. We'll leave the animal card deck face down. Art tokens are going next to the art cards. Next, we lay out 10 achievement tokens randomly from left to right. Then we set up the top of the board with action boards. One is the tribe actions, and the other one is advanced actions. We also lay down trade crystals in the designated spaces in the matching color for every path. Here, we place down a DNA that the players will be building throughout the game. Next, we move over here to the other side of the map and we set up the age tracker. We put the indicating cube at the very top and fill out the rest of the slots with trade crystals. Now, the last step for the setup of the main game is collecting the resources for each of the continents in a matching color bowl. In order to build every bowl, we look at the composition of resources next to every continent and we put those resources in the bowl. Now that we're done with the main game setup, let's move over to the player setup. First, we assign tribes to every player. In this case, this player received Homo sapiens and also 4 camp tokens, 4 advanced buildings, 2 tribe dice, 3 food resources, and 18 tribesmen. 2 of them are going to go to the starting location, which is Africa for Homo sapiens, and also 1 of them is going to go to a specific advancement path, which is progress for Homo sapiens. Now, we also draw 1 trade resource, and lastly, we give every player 2 invention cards, out of which the player chooses 1 and discards the other one. Now we're done with the player setup, and we can move on to playing. Let's talk about the turn structure now and how to perform actions. Every game of Nomads is divided into 3 stages called ages. There are 3 of them, and each one consists of multiple rounds when players take actions by rolling their dice and performing actions one by one. Let's go through an example. The first player for the round is determined by the lowest die. In this case, it's the orange player that has 2, and he will go first in this round. After the first player is determined, the rest of the players go in clockwise order after this one. Now let's look at example actions. We have forage, migrate, build, and glean as the main tribe actions, and then we have all the other ones, which are advanced actions. We'll talk about them later. As an example, the orange player will take the forage action and carry it out completely, and at that point, the black player is going to take another action, which, when placing die, the decision to be made is whether it fits the requirements of an action. In order to take a forage action after somebody else, the die has to be either, it says plus or minus 1, the die has to be higher or lower than the previous die. In this case, it's 1 higher, so this player can take this action as well. The important part about the numbers at the bottom of the slots is that the first player who goes takes this action once. The second player takes it twice. The third player takes it also twice, but also has to spend a food resource, and so on and so on and so on. The migrate action has slightly different requirements because the die sequence has to be just different. So the next die just has to be different than the previous one. In case of the build action, it requires 4, 5, or 6 values on the die plus a food resource. The glean action is a little different because you can take any of these slots and benefit from food resources. In this case, it will be 3 fruit, 2 fish, or 1 meat. That's the summary of the basic actions. If after rolling your dice, you realize that you don't have the right number to match the requirement of a specific action you'd like to take, let's imagine that this was a 4 and you'd like to take a forage action, you could use your food resources, which each one changes your dice in a different way. Fruit rerolls a die, meat flips it to the opposite side, and fish changes it plus 1 or minus 1. I could take this fish, spend it and discard it, and change this die to a 3, and at that point, I'll be able to take the forage action. You can perform that changing of dice as many times as you have resources per turn. Let's talk about each one of the tribe actions in a little more detail. The forage action allows you to collect resources from spaces where you have your tribesmen. In this case, this action is performed at the power of 2, which means that I can collect resources from 2 different spaces. You can collect resources up to the amount of tribesmen that you have in the space. So in this case, I would draw 3 resources from the gray bowl, matching the continent, put them on the space, and then choose which ones of these to collect onto my tribe board and which ones of these keep on the board. In this case, I'm going to take the ore and clay and put them on my board and leave the fish since I already have food resources here. What's important is that since I drew 3 resources from here, and that's the space limit, I also exhausted that space and I won't be able to draw resources from this space anymore. Now let's talk about the migrate action. This one, similarly, also can be taken twice, which means that I can move my tribesmen to 2 different adjacent spaces. In this case, I could choose to move this guy here and these 2 guys over here. It doesn't matter how many tribesmen you move, it only matters to how many spaces you move. Alternatively, I could choose to move these tribesmen through 2 different spaces this way. If I chose to finish my move right here, I would also be able to pick up the vision token, which would go to my the tribe board, and would allow me to draw 2 tribe objectives. And then I would be able to look at them secretly and choose which one to keep for the remainder of the game. Now let's talk about the build action. Let's imagine that the black player took this action, spent 1 food resource to take it. What this means is that now I can take the resources that I have collected on my tribe board and use them to build one of the structures, either a camp or an advanced building. Having 3 stone resources allows me to build a stone camp, which requires 3 resources. And at that point, I will be able to place it on any of the spaces where I have my tribesmen. Let's put it right here. The benefit of a camp is that anytime when I populate my tribes, and we're about to talk about that, I'll be able to get 1 more tribesman on this space. The last action on the tribe action board is the glean action. Let's imagine that the orange player, instead of migrating, took this action. The player can choose which slot to take in any order and without any dependency on other dice around it, and can choose to take 3 fruit, 2 fish, or 1 meat and put it on their tribe board. Before the round is over, all of the tribes will populate. Every tribe following the turn order will now look at the most populated spaces with their tribesmen. And in this case, Homo sapiens have 2 of these spaces with 2 tribesmen, which means that the player can choose whether to populate here or here. Let's put the tribesmen here. The Neanderthal have this spaces most populated, so the extra tribesman is going to go here. However, there's also a camp that has been built, which means that an extra tribesman can go on this space. The last step within the round after populating is moving the age tracker down the path. And it always is done by the last player who populated. In this case, it was the player leading the Neanderthal tribe. And the token is moved down, and the trade crystal goes to the player performing that action. Now the round is over, and we can start a new round. Now let's talk about the advanced actions. Players, instead of taking the basic tribe actions, after rolling their dice, can also choose, in this case, this would be the starting player for the round, because he has 1 and 2 versus 1 and 4. Instead of taking tribe actions, this player could go for any of the advanced actions. The way it works is that the dice get assigned the same exact way from the leftmost open slot. In this case, if the black player wanted to take an action from the dominance path, he would assign the die right here and then choose one of the actions that are listed at the bottom of the advancement path. In this case, it's explore, hunt, or raid. However, access to these actions is not available from the very beginning of the game because every action has their own requirements. To figure out if you can afford to take this action, you look at the numbers at the bottom of the slot. In this case, I get 1 point for the placing the die here and 0 points for my tribesman being here, which shows the proficiency within this advancement path. In this case, it means that I can take actions that have a requirement of 1. This and this action is already too high. In order to take an explore action, I put the die here, and then explore action allows me to explore spaces around me in terms of finding resources there, +1. After a player takes an action with an advancement path, the proficiency is also growing. So then the tribesman is moving to the right of the path, and the next time, he or she might be able to take farther actions that are more advanced. The next player, who is taking action after the black player, would have to be able to put a die that is higher than this die, however, and also pay one of the food resources. But then the benefit of taking this action second after somebody is that is already 2. In this case, the orange player doesn't have any tribesmen committed to this path yet, which means that it also doesn't benefit from the proficiency. However, this 2 allows him to take this action on this level or go hunting for at the level 2. Now let's imagine a different scenario. The yellow player would like to take a culture action, which he already has a tribesman committed to first spot within the proficiency track. That means that I can take an action at this point that meets the requirement of 1. In this case, I would be able to create arts and collect the art card, assuming that I have the resources that match that art card. Let's go over here for a second. These are the art cards that are available at this point, and they show right away which resources are required to be able to initiate this art project. Performing an create art action at the level 1 allows me to take, let's say, any of these and put that in my player space, assuming that I have resources that I can start the project with. At this point, I would put a meat resource on it, and I would continue building it throughout the rest of the game. And let's imagine that after the last action that was taken, this tribesman was able to move into this space. At that point, this tribesman and this tribe is able to collect this inspiration trade crystal, which goes to the player board. And from now on, this tribe is able to use those trade crystals to perform specific benefits related to those crystals. Let's talk about those. Every advancement path has a specific trait that is assigned to it. For culture, it's inspiration, and those crystals allow you to replace any one specific resource. Dominance has determination, which allows you to take a action even if the slot for that action is already occupied. For progress, we have curiosity, which allows you to boost any of your advanced actions by 1. For spirituality, it's faith, which allows you to change one global objective over here, the value of the global objective, and you can increase its value or decrease its value by 1, which will affect how many points players score for it at the end of the age. You're allowed to spend 1 crystal per turn. And at that point, as soon as you spend it, you assign it to any open slots within the human DNA board. In this case, what happens is that I put this inspiration trait crystal on one of the blue slots. And over time, when players combine more and more crystals over time, this DNA will be filling up throughout the game. And at some point, let's imagine that the player who was playing a red crystal filled up this last spot within this smallest strand, and that player automatically scores 3 heritage points, which are equal to victory points in Nomads, and this strand is completed. Now, if players altogether keep continuing building up the strands, and let's assume that they collected red, and then the last player put in the blue crystal as well, and this player scores 3 points, but also from 2 combined strands, there's an extra benefit. Most of these refer to extra points for specific accomplishments in the game, like for all the build structures, all the players are going to score +1 point at the end of the game, or +1 point for completed tribe objectives. If these 2 strands were to be completed, every single player would receive an extra tribe die to use for the rest of the game. We won't have time in this short overview video to go over every single one, advanced action in detail, but let me just point out some of them to you. Creating art allows you to create art, as we saw earlier, but it also allows you to place an art token on the map and increase the value of that space for the final scoring. Trading allows you to exchange resources when you don't have access to them through foraging. Celebrating allows you to take multiple actions on a single turn as long as you're in the same space as another tribe. Within dominance, we have explore, hunting, and raiding. Exploration, we discussed already, allows you to explore and find more resources. Hunting allows you to hunt for animals, and we have many of those that are actually represented by animals from that period of time. Raiding allows you to steal resources from other tribes that you're sharing space with, or push them out of the spaces where they are. Moving over to progress, we can invent various inventions. Cultivating allows you to multiply resources on a space where you have already discovered certain resources. Learning allows you to learn from other tribes, the inventions that they have created, or increase the proficiency within each path based on what they're better at. Within spirituality, we have worship, which allows you to use the blessing die, which have different benefits when you roll it, and based on that, you get those benefits. Sacrifice allows you to use an animal on a space where you discovered it and receive specific trade crystals, either a random one or a specific one if you're looking for one to complete the DNA strand. And the last action here is convert, which is very powerful because it allows you to steal a die from another player and perform an action instead of them. As you advance your tribes throughout the game, you also gain access to very powerful elder cards. The way it happens is that if you advance your tribesmen across an advancement path and you pass the elder spot, you get to draw 2 elder cards with very powerful abilities on them. You get to choose one of these cards to keep. And additionally, you also get to receive that trade crystal that is shown on the card. And most importantly, you also receive an elder die. You can tell that it's different because it's see-through, and it allows you to take actions in a slightly different way than the regular tribe die. What it does is that when you take an action, you can actually boost your action that you took on the same turn and take it again before others take up that slot. And additionally, if at any point you were to take an action that requires paying food, you wouldn't need to do that with an elder die. You can only have one of those in a game, but it's a very powerful tool. One of my favorite aspects of Nomads is the achievement track. What it is that we have 10 different achievement tokens laid out at the beginning of the game. And throughout the game, as different players progress through different accomplishments, as soon as any of the players completes the leftmost token or the accomplishment that is represented by the token, that player gets to take the token and assign it to any open slots on the player's upgrade board. Which means that in this case, I could choose which benefits I'm interested in the most. If I were to choose to place this achievement token right here, the next time I receive another achievement token, let's say a couple of rounds later, if I were to get this one, I could choose to build up towards the completing the row. And if I do, I receive also the benefit that is shown on the side of the row. In this case, I would get 4 additional tribesmen. Over the course of the game, if you keep getting more and more of those tokens, you can go towards building up even more powerful benefits like gaining 10 victory points at the end of the game, or any of the other ones that are listed on the side. We're getting to the end of this video and also to the end of the game. Let's talk about how to wrap up the last age and carry out the final scoring. As soon as the age tracking token moves to the end space, we resolve the last end of age event. Next, we move over to the global objectives and score those according to the scoring token that is shown on every single objective. The final scoring now focuses mostly on the control of the region and the continents. Additionally, we'll look at the entire human DNA that has been completed throughout the game and see if any of the additional scoring elements have been unlocked. In this case, it looks like the +1 point for all of the acquired cards has been unlocked, which means that all of the players score +1 point for all of the cards that they have collected. And in this case, Homo sapiens scored 86 points, and the Neanderthal tribe scored 69, which means that in this case, Homo sapiens is the winning tribe, just like in our history. I hope you enjoyed this brief overview of the game Nomads, and it gives you a good sense of how it might play. I had to leave a lot of details out of this, but I hope that you'll get a chance to look at the complete rulebook and one day give it a play yourself. Thank you for providing any feedback if you have any ideas on how to improve it or how to change the gameplay to represent how human evolution took place. Thank you for your time.